Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC Football Podcast. My name's Joey Weaver. He is Mike McDaniel. Mike, we are back at long last. We swear we didn't mean for it to be this long. How you doing?
I'm good. It's been about 3 weeks. We recorded right before a national championship game. We plan to record since then. Logistical issues on both sides, we'll call it. We're back. We're back. We have season recaps, like scheduled, recording, like everything we promised.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just been a little bit. Last couple of weeks, been a little crazy.
Yeah, the month of January was something.
Yeah,
there has been no less than 4 or 5 times that we have made a legitimate attempt to try to record, and then just things fall through. I know that work has been absolutely kicking your ass. The last time we recorded, I was like on the very front end of a stomach bug that was in progress of hitting our house like a freight train. And then there was a winter storm that came through, and like my wife was at work for 3 straight days, and then I had like a sinus infection, and it's been a hell of a few weeks. So apologies to the people we promised we would be back sooner than we are here. For those who are new around here, we never do this. This is the only time this has ever happened. So please don't think that this is a normal thing in the off season that we go longer than intended in between recordings.
Yeah, because we've never done this before. So
that's right.
This is the first time this has ever happened. So
exactly.
Alexis Solaris is asking us a really important question here. Where is my man producer Scott? He's got an early morning tomorrow, so he texted us and said he was going to bed. That's fine.
Nerd.
It's fine. I mean, some of us, we're out here. I'm just kidding. I was gonna say we're out here grinding, and Scott's grinding and making like the big bucks. So we're just we're here slap-dicking around at 10:54 Eastern time.
I was gonna say I don't know who's out here trying to be well rested for work, but couldn't be me. So
there's 4 kids between the two of us. 5 as well, I guess, if you're counting Scott. I don't know what we're talking about here. We all have young kids and have jobs and priorities and stuff we gotta do.
Yeah,
Scott will be back. Don't worry, he'll be back soon.
Mike, we are live, youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. It is a few minutes before 11 o'clock Eastern on Monday, February the 3rd. We're coming up on early signing day, I guess. I don't know what you're doing to celebrate. I know what I'm doing, and I can't tell you. It's a big deal.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, fair enough. I am a true where were you moment.
Mm-hmm.
Signing day,
Yeah. Where were you on that February signing day?
Yeah.
Mike, we got a bunch of news that we need to go over that has popped up basically since the last time that we recorded. We've got a schedule for the fall we're going to get into. We've got a TV contract amendment that we got to hit on. We've got some coordinator changes that are still in progress that have happened. A lot of things here. So let's jump in. Probably the biggest single piece of news that we had in the time since we last recorded. We got notification probably about a week ago that ESPN officially extended their contract with the ACC for an additional 10 years. Basically, this was originally signed, I think it took effect in 2016, and it was set to cover 2016 through 2025 maybe, or 2017 through 26. And then there was an option for ESPN to add an additional 10 years within the same structure on their end. And I mean, first of all, from that standpoint, to me, this is kind of a no-brainer for ESPN. I mean, they're getting a really good deal here, I think, for the amount of inventory that they're getting and the quality of inventory. If they had opted out going into 27, this was probably going to be more expensive for them to get some of the same stuff that they already have. And so not a surprise for me from ESPN's standpoint that they would want to extend this contract. And I think we've kind of seen that coming for a few years now.
Yeah, I mean, they've been getting a sweetheart of a deal, right? I mean, the TV contracts, how the how things aligned for the other leagues ended up in this huge boom. Meanwhile, the ACC was kind of locked into theirs and had been for a while. The last few years of realignment didn't really affect the ACC all that much outside of the lawsuits of Florida State and Clemson. Florida State obviously much louder than Clemson, trying to get out of the ACC. Clemson has voiced their displeasure with the existing television contract. Florida State much more loudly has voiced their displeasure, to the point of like, we were right before we hit record, I'm like, how do we want to approach this topic? And what I mentioned to you was, like, Clemson's mad, but Clemson's not like Drew Weatherfording their way through like Board of Visitors calls and stuff like that, like very publicly saying that we hate the ACC. So, karma's a real bitch when you go 2-10, I guess.
Yeah.
One of those 2 wins is Charleston Southern. So good for them. Good on you.
Yeah.
For Clemson and Florida State, for the bigger brands of the ACC, they've wanted kind of a bigger bump so that they can be competing with really the Big Ten and the SEC. I think what we found out in the first year of this like conference realignment, these expanded conferences, is as long as the college football playoff is kind of the way that it is. I mean, we just saw 2 ACC teams get into the field, and there were really only a few teams that we saw that could actually win a national title, and those were the teams that advanced. I don't think the ACC is in like a terrible position right at this point. I think it was much more dire before we actually saw how like the first 12-team college football playoff would play out. I think if we get into an iteration of the playoff where we start like guaranteeing bids to like the Big Ten and the SEC, and like no matter what, they're going to get X amount of teams in, I think then there's like a legitimate gripe for some of these ACC schools. This really is a money race. I think that this was probably a much more untenable situation for the Clemsons and the Florida States of the world when the revenue sharing thing wasn't like in place, when this was really just like an NIL arms race. It's still going to be that, but I think the revenue sharing structure is going to help so that it's not quite as wild of a Wild West.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is probably going to help is like putting guardrails on the transfer portal as far as windows. And I think, the conferences, the power conferences seem unified on that at least. So, I think there's some structure to the sport right now that makes things a little bit easier for the ACC, in a better spot than maybe we thought it was going to be in last summer. Back to a television contract, that for ESPN, it's a no-brainer. For some of the bigger brands, I mean, the way they're structuring this is that like the bigger brands are going to get a little bit of a bump, right? Bigger games, right? The bigger games are going to be on national TV networks for ESPN more often. You're going to have this sort of very like vague like brand bump in terms of like revenue, which we'll see what that ends up looking like. And then there's going to be incentives for making the college football playoff and making a big bowl game and the stuff that's already been there. But you're extending the contract out. There's more money in the pot now. I think this is a big time benefit to ESPN to extend the contract, a real no-brainer. But I think for the ACC and the schools within it, I think that there are some benefits here as well. You're in a much better spot here, I think, than we thought they might be last summer.
Yeah.
So I think overall it's a win-win, I think, with the current state of college football. I don't know if we're going to see the big time realignment for maybe 5 or 6 years. I think we're probably done with, just because I don't know who's going to move into like a bigger conference at this point, who they're going to poach.
Right.
Clemson and Florida State can't get out of this grant of rights. So I don't know how hard they'll be looking at this point. I think that was part of the deal with extending this contract with ESPN. It was going to be kind of, let's chill out with the lawsuits. Like, let's find a way to move forward together. And I don't know. I think there's stability here for at least the next few years, maybe.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what it seems like. And I mean, Will Kirby makes the point. It seems like a Band-Aid till 2031. I mean, like we're kind of just buying time here at some point and realizing that, again, with all the other, kind of macro realignment stuff and the the playoff stuff and the house settlement and like all this other stuff that's going on kind of within the sport. I mean, things might look very different in 5 years for what college football is, how it's organized, and how revenue is distributed and spent, and like all these different things. So I think it's a fair move on all fronts to try to buy some time here. And the other thing that I would mention is, again, that 2017 through 2036 window, I mean, that's a 20-year TV deal. I just want to point out that, and something that got brought up, and I think last year in the offseason a little bit, was as the Big Ten went to market and they signed part of their deal with CBS, part of it with Fox, part of it with NBC, like they really broke it apart. And they're going to get to go back and renegotiate this stuff before the end of the decade. Mm-hmm. So, like, just to be clear, like, these other conferences are not doing this long-term thing. Like, they're redoing these things every 6 and 8 years. And I think there is an element of you can make more money that way, but there is also the risk of, again, kind of being fractured apart with the realignment stuff. I mean, that was like one of the big impetus things for Texas and Oklahoma to leave the Big 12 when they did, was that TV deal was coming up, and they didn't want to be locked into some new grant of rights for the extent of a new TV deal. So, again, these are things I think that are important for the ACC in particular right now in its current form, and a lot of things need to happen between now and that 2031 date and kind of beyond, and we'll have to see where it takes us, but. Yeah, I mean, kind of big news, but not really surprising. It was more just, it felt a little bit like a formality for me at this point, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, the deal expired after the 2027 season. Something had to happen. We knew that ESPN was going to be interested in extending this out. So,
yep,
kind of a formality, and the details of it are really vague. I mean, these like brand bonuses and stuff. Like, what is that? Like, not a whole lot from that standpoint in terms of like how that's going to be paid out, what that's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like the end goal was to appease the bigger brands of the ACC, of which there are not that many. So
right,
I mean, it's bigger TV spots. I mean, I for one would love to see Florida State in some more big TV spots and watch them play like they did last season. That'd be great.
Would break your heart.
Would not, certainly would not.
One of the pieces we kind of talked about here is some of this is related to the playoff and that structure and that contract. There was another piece of news that we got in the last couple of weeks from the ACC, and I'll call it news, but really it almost seems like this was just kind of something being thrown at the wall by Jim Phillips, like almost a throwaway line in a press conference. You know, we're evaluating all ideas. He kind of floated the idea that maybe the ACC considers some changes to the current championship game format. I believe the primary idea that he threw out was maybe the regular season champion is designated the ACC champion, and then you play a game instead of between 1 and 2, you play the game between 2 and 3 as a way to then try to get another team into the playoff. And I mean, everyone saw this, heard this immediately. It sounds like a really half-baked idea, and this is where I think I would go to where Chip Patterson likes. I always hear him on Cover 3 and the Puntcast talk about we're in the no bad ideas phase. Like, he is just throwing stuff out. I don't know that I necessarily appreciate him doing this in open press conferences as opposed to in, like roundtable meetings with like leadership and such.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to throw this out into the ether and let people run with it and do what they will with it. But either way, I don't think this is a real thing that will come to pass. But if nothing else, I mean, it is a sign that so much of this nowadays is going to revolve around the playoff and trying to get teams into the playoff, and what's our strategy for making sure that we optimize how much playoff inventory we are able to provide, basically, as a conference.
The elongated schedule for the college football season has become a source of chatter. Like, why are we playing the national championship game in the middle of the NFL playoffs? Like, that's been the talk. And by middle of the playoffs, like, why is a national championship game taking place like between the divisional round and like the conference title game weekend?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are we Why are we doing this to ourselves?
Well, and they just signed an agreement here in a couple of years. They're going to play it on like January 26th. Like, can we get this over with before the end of January? Come on.
By the way, January 26th, like we're sitting here recording February 3rd. January 26th was a week ago. What are we doing? What are we doing? I
don't know.
We're gonna be running this up with a Super Bowl. Like we're gonna have this like one big week. I mean that would be something, But let's one big weekend. We got national title Saturday night, Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, sign me up. I'd be game. I don't know how that would work, but
I mean, I'm team Super Bowl should be Saturday personally, but either way, neither here nor there.
I'm there too. Or you just make Monday a holiday for everybody, but we know that doesn't work. That's not how that works.
It's pretty un-American, frankly, but anyways.
Yeah, I agree. Back to this. This whole thing, what I'm getting at with like the schedule being extended for like broader college football is there's been talk about conference championship games potentially being done away with, right? As a way to kind of bring the schedule back like this, like tightened up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're getting is, especially if they expand from 12 teams to like 14 or 16, which is being talked about in a year or two, there's going to be another round of games. So like, how do you make that work given teams are already playing 12 game schedules before conference title weekend and could end up playing 3, 4 or more games, depending on what kind of run you make? Like how are we going to have these college kids playing NFL schedules, right? With it being every week is just insane. You're traveling all over the place. I mean, I think the argument is these guys are starting to get paid, so now you can do this, but I don't know. All that to say, all the conversation, like you just mentioned, is going to be around the conference title games and the college football playoff. And how do you get more of your teams from your conference into the field? And a big point of contention, you'll remember going into the bracket day, like bracket selection day on Sunday, was did SMU do enough in the ACC title game for the conference to get 2 teams into the field? And remember, SMU was like a shoe-in for the conference title game, and Clemson had just lost the week prior to South Carolina. The only way that Clemson was getting into the field, and quite honestly, the only way the ACC had a chance to get 2 teams into the field, was if Clemson won the conference title game. So it became kind of a catch-22 for the ACC. It was, you're either going to get 1 team in for sure, or you might get 2, and the one who probably deserves to be there might be left out. That was the conversation with the ACC. SMU had been a very good team all year, and they lost to Clemson in a wild ACC title game. And then the conversation was, is SMU, who was one of the best teams in the conference all year, are they now going to be left out because Clemson came out of nowhere and won the ACC? That was the conversation on Sunday, and ended up not being a problem. But Jim Phillips is trying to protect against that moving forward. Like, how do we make sure our team that essentially won the regular season or finished atop the standings in the regular season doesn't have a chance of getting left out?
Yeah.
And that's what he's trying to protect against. This is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. The SMU won the regular season, and now Clemson and whoever the number 3 team was it Miami? I think it was Miami finished third, right? Or tied for third, whatever. However that ended up working out after Miami fumbled the bag.
So it might have been like tied with Louisville or something there at the end.
Yeah. I think it was Miami and Louisville and that 3A, 3B spot. I don't know how that works out with conference tie breaks.
No, Miami was in third by themselves.
Okay. Well, there you go. Fair enough. Anyway, so then Miami would be playing Clemson for the conference title, and SMU is just in the field. Is the college football playoff going to be fine with that? The playoff that wants as many Big Ten and SEC teams as possible, they gonna be cool with that, or they can even let a second ACC team in if you're doing it that way?
I mean, is that even a conference title game at that point?
No.
What?
No.
It's
a conference. It's a conference consolation game.
Exhibition? Like, I don't know. And
we don't need a bowl game in early December.
Yeah, I'm definitely coming around to the idea of like it might be time to just get rid of conference championship games. Like, I mean, these massive conferences, and we talked about this year. I mean, some frustrations around how much of the record is based on how good you are versus just who's on your schedule and who's not? Because these massive conferences are getting just more and more like disjointed of who you do play, who you don't play, and I don't know. I kind of see them getting rid of conference championship games because, I mean, to your point with the playoff, I mean, think about the teams that made the national title game. They played 2 additional rounds beyond what they normally would have been playing in the 14 playoff.
Yep.
I mean, and thankfully, neither of them played in a conference championship game, so you wouldn't have had 5 extra games. But, like, that's on the table. Like, that can happen in this playoff structure. And I just think back to, like, it was like every round of the playoff, teams that were moving on, it was like, oh, but they lost this important player in the last game. And maybe you won by 2 touchdowns, but at some point you've got injuries that are piling up, and it becomes like a war of attrition at times. And yeah, like we got to figure something out. And I think the easiest thing is either getting rid of or somehow reformatting these conference championship games. And I don't know, maybe do you do some sort of like preseason exhibition with it, or I don't know, but it doesn't make sense to kind of keep it the way that it has been and is if ultimately they are really just kind of a tool meant to serve and service the playoff. So
it's just for television, and it gives the league another opportunity to make money. So like they're not going to be really, as much as they complain about maybe a second team getting left out, like the ACC wants that television money. So really, like, what are you going to do with it? You're not getting rid of the conference title game. I'm with you. I do agree with you though. Like I think we're getting to the point now, if this playoff expands again, like why are we playing a conference title game? I totally agree with you. I just don't. I would be surprised to see it go away, just for monetary reasons.
Totally valid point.
Yeah. Now, I again, the point you made about these teams are playing extra rounds and guys are getting injured. I mean, Notre Dame was in the national championship game because they had ridiculous depth this year. But you look up and down their roster. I mean, they had one of the, in terms of injury luck, Notre Dame was, if not at the top of the sport, top 3 team in the sport in terms of like terrible injury luck this year with guys they lost going into the playoff, right? Which don't really count towards the conversation. But then guys they lost in the playoff, they had offensive linemen going down. They lost Riley Mills at like 5 plays into the Indiana game. They lose him, and he's been holding up the middle of the defensive line the entire season. He was borderline All-American. I mean, these guys playing like 5 or 6 extra games after, if you count conference title weekend and we expand this thing, and all of a sudden, like you go on a run, you're playing like you got to win 17 or 18 games maybe, or you got to at least play 17 or 18 games to try to win a national championship. It's getting insane. Yeah. Right. And great college football year. Like I've been standing atop the mountains, bitching and moaning about the 12-team playoff. I've been talking to, this. I've been complaining about it. I thought, if we were expanding it should go to 8. You can get your power conferences in, couple group of 5s, or, your one group of 5 and a couple at-larges, and we'll call it a day. Why are we doing 12 teams? There are never 12 teams that can win a national title, but at least you get the representation in, and we quit bitching and moaning about that. And I loved it. Like I could not have been more wrong about. I enjoyed it. Like Arizona State, Texas was incredible. Like the games were awesome. Notre Dame in the national title game, like they're down, then they come back, and Ohio State's got to complete 3rd and 12, or else they're going to give the ball back to Notre Dame, who all of a sudden they found lightning in a bottle on offense and are moving the ball again, or is Notre Dame going to try to send the game to overtime? National title was a banger. Just a great college football year, right? Yeah. Regular season. I'm talking about the 12-team playoff. Now the regular season going to be watered down and losses don't mean as much. The losses don't mean as much, right? Like Ohio State loses to Michigan, they still go on to win the national championship. That's a true statement. Like the losses don't mean as much, but like the regular season games matter. Like they still matter in a way that I didn't think they would at the outset of this. So I was wrong about that. And I don't know. I great college football year, but this would be so dumb. Tying it back to the topic, this would be so dumb. Like, please don't do this.
Feel free to do something. don't do this.
Don't do this. And if you want to eliminate the conference title game, totally cool. I just, don't see it happening. That might be the easiest way to do it, honestly.
Yeah, right. But, exactly.
Yeah.
Last piece of conference-wide news here, Mike. We got the schedule release for 2025. We've got games, we've got dates, and a few times thrown in there.
Mm-hmm.
Any immediate big takeaways from you on kind of what you saw schedule-wise here? Or, I mean, do you want to just kind of harp on Virginia Tech's schedule for a minute? Or, what's your kind of big – what sticks out in your mind about the schedule going into this fall?
Yeah, we are about 6.5 months away from Stanford kicking off the season on the road to Hawaii in week 0.
Mm-hmm.
So we're almost there.
Yeah, I mean, we made it.
We made it. We're almost there. I mean, the longer the season goes, the easier the off season is for us, right? We talk about content that spring ball right around the corner. Yeah. No, I mean, just the Virginia Tech point. I mean, they got a brutal November. Louisville bye week, Florida State on the road. Hopefully Florida State's better. Home, well, it would be funny if they weren't, but that's neither here nor there. Home against Miami, at UVA to close it out. A brutal 4-game stretch there to close the year. Virginia Tech's got a tough schedule, and sucks for them. You should have won more games this year when they had to worry about it. Miami doesn't leave the state of Florida until November. That's a big one for me. It's like, wow, that's lucky.
And that's with 8 home games too, by the way. 8 games of 12 that they're playing at Hard Rock Stadium.
Yeah.
Now, I will call this out because I know that Cam and a handful of Miami fans were up in arms saying that they got screwed by the ACC. And again, I want to remind you, you're playing 8 home games. At the point that you're playing 8 true home games, I don't really want to hear you complain about the schedule, okay? But also I get it that 2 of your 4 road games are the final 2 games of the season, and it's in Blacksburg and it's in Pittsburgh. So, of course, we're going to make Miami go to the cold places in November. So I understand that complaint, but you really shouldn't be complaining when you're playing 8 home games. That's ridiculous.
I have an idea I can really only throw into the I can only throw this bomb in early February. This is mostly for the YouTube comments afterwards. Miami fans getting really mad. Cam's gonna laugh at this. By the way, we're having Cam on a couple nights from now. I'll throw this in front of him and see what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Miami has Notre Dame, Bethune-Cookman, South Florida, and the Gators in the first 4 games. Then they have a bye week before they travel to Tallahassee to play Florida State. Joey, I have a question. Going into October 4th, there is a non-zero chance Miami is 2-2. If they were to lose that game to Florida State, I would like to turn up the hot seat meter, to turn up the heat a little bit on Mario Cristobal's hot seat. Just a smidge. Would like to get that going. After Florida State just went 2-10 this year, I would like to turn that up a couple notches. And given how Miami had everything in front of them this year and found a way not to make the conference title, which we'll talk to Cam about here in a few nights. A very interesting layout. Then they have another bye week and then they play Louisville. This could get late early for Miami if this Carson Beck thing does not work out, is what I would say.
What is more likely in your mind? Coming back from Tallahassee 2-3, or coming back from Tallahassee 5-0?
2-3.
Beating Notre Dame's going to be challenging. Florida might be better. Florida State is going to be at home, and in theory, it can't be this bad again, right? It certainly can't be worse.
Well, I mean, if they're this bad again, we'll be talking about Florida State coaching search.
Norvell might be gone by then if that's the case. That is it's a little bit of a treacherous open to the schedule. And I mean, again, Notre Dame and Florida, I think, are probably games that Miami more or less scheduled or had. I don't know necessarily they pulled in the Notre Dame game that specific day, but I mean, you kind of knew this is what your out of conference was going to be this season, and Yeah, it's going to be. We'll see how Carson Beck does right out the gate.
A couple things about the teams there, right? Like Notre Dame's losing some good players, Xavier Watts and Benjamin Morrison, who was hurt halfway through the year. Riley Mills is done. Howard Cross. They're obviously Riley Leonard. They're losing some guys. They got like 1 million 4-stars on the offensive line, 4 or 5 stars, and basically their entire starting offensive line they had in camp just got hurt early in the year. So a bunch of younger guys played over them and then transferred out. Everybody's like, what's going on at Notre Dame? What's going on with the offensive line room? The better players, the ones who were supposed to start, they're actually going to be playing next year if they stay healthy. Notre Dame might, we'll see what happens at quarterback, but they're returning a bunch too. Like they're returning a lot of good young players on defense that played a lot this year out of necessity. That's going to be a top 5 Notre Dame team in the opener. Florida with Lagway, seeing how they finished the year with the final 6 games, they got something with him.
So they got hot late in the year.
They got hot. Lagway's a stud. I only say those few things, right? Because those are 2 quality opponents that 2 very tough opponents Miami needs to play in the first 4 weeks of the season. And Miami's losing a lot. And this Miami team we talked about on this podcast, if they did not have Cam Ward, this felt like a 6 or 7 win Miami team this year. Like Cam Ward was incredible. Xavier Restrepo, incredible. But a very inconsistent roster across the board that if they didn't have Cam Ward, who engineered like 4 or 5 comebacks, what is Miami's record? And Carson Beck, while an above-average college quarterback, he is not Cam Ward. He is not going to pull you out of the fight. He's just not that guy. He can make every throw, but he doesn't have the explosiveness that Ward has, where he can make like 5 throws and put you back in the game. Beck has not been that his entire career. So it's going to be different, and they have to be better around Beck next season, because if not, the schedule is challenging enough where Miami's going to hit some roadblocks.
Yep, completely. And as you mentioned, I mean, we're going to talk to Cam later this week. I don't know if that'll be a live episode necessarily.
Not sure. Yeah, not sure.
But at the very least, we will be doing a Miami season recap, and so we'll have plenty of time to kind of talk about that whole situation and the Carson Beck incoming thing and kind of what next year looks like. So we'll do that with Cam later this week. Something that stuck out to me, and I swear that this is not a bit, and this I'm really trying not to be like biased here. There is a very real scenario to me where Syracuse goes winless outside of the Carrier Dome and might like need to shoot the moon in the Carrier Dome to make a bowl game next year. You consider a little bit of what they're losing, but then you realize that they start with Tennessee at a neutral site. They are at Clemson. They are at SMU. They are at Georgia Tech. They are at Miami. They are at Notre Dame.
There is not a tougher road schedule in the ACC than the one Syracuse has.
That is brutal. That is miserable to play all those games away from home. I mean, on some level, you could say like it's kind of nice to play your toughest games away from home and play, kind of more toss-ups at home that give you a better chance to win. But yeah, that is. I'm not going to tell you that they definitely won't beat SMU, Georgia Tech, Miami, but I mean, you could go 0-3 there, and you certainly could go 0-3 Tennessee, Clemson, and Notre Dame on the road. So, I mean, thankfully, UConn, Colgate, Duke, Pitt, North Carolina, and Boston College at home. I mean, all of those are fairly winnable. But again, you might have to go 5-1 or 6-0 across that stretch to make a bowl game.
Oh, we're gonna bring this one up. Fran Brown's wife is going to be extra lonely this fall. Thank you for that. New jacket. Thank you very much. Yeah, the good news, if you want some optimism, if you're a Syracuse fan, your home games are very winnable. Like, you have a bunch of winnable home games. UConn has been better under Jim Mora, right? Has been better. That's definitely a losable game, but it's one you if you play like you did this year, you should win it, right? Colgate, Duke with Darian Mensah should be better. in theory, but that's a winnable game. Pitt at home. Pitt, I think, is going to be pretty bad. So that, at least on paper, chance to be bad. Carolina, we'll see.
Yeah.
Who else? BC.
Boston College.
BC at the end of the year, like winnable. So yeah, the Georgia Tech, SMU, Miami set of road games. If you can find a way to go 2-1, I think you're definitely making a bowl game with the other teams on the schedule. But yeah, I'm with you. There are there are some roadblocks there in terms of the road. That's a brutal road slate.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I wanted to call out to. I'm doing this kind of off the dome here, but Duke, Miami, North Carolina, and I'm trying to see. I don't think there's anyone else. All three of them have. So this is a season where we all have 2 bye weeks again.
Yep.
All three of them, Duke, Carolina, and Miami, all have a bye week game, bye week set, like basically in 3 weeks.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where it would be nice to spread out the bye weeks a little bit more. So if you're a fan of one of those teams, fair to complain about that in my book.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. Now, I guess the benefit of it is this is happening in the middle of the schedule while some other teams are getting real beat up. So maybe that ends up being a benefit. But yeah, I would agree. I think most coaching staffs would like if we're having 2 bye weeks, let's get one in week 4 and let's get another one in week 8. So we can be ready for the home stretch in November and we can recover from whatever our non-conference schedule was. I think that would be the reasonable take for most coaches. Joey, I want to call out, and we're going to talk about Clemson here in a couple of minutes in terms of the coaching change. I want to call out Clemson's schedule because I think there is some real potential. First, I'm calling my shot now. I think Clemson's going to win the ACC, at least as we sit here in February. On paper, really good team returning. Love their coaching staff. Love what Dabo's done in the portal. I think they have a chance to be really good. The schedule is pretty gettable for Clemson next year too. It sets up well, right? So, you have LSU in the opener. I believe that's a neutral site.
Is it? Or is that a Death Valley on Death Valley home and home?
Don't know for sure. I don't know for sure.
Hang on, hold on. This is important.
I don't know. We check on that. But your road games are Georgia Tech, who should be good.
That's in Memorial Stadium.
That'll be fun.
That will be fun. Good on you. Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, Georgia Tech, Carolina, BC, Louisville, South Carolina are your road games. South Carolina should be pretty good. Louisville, we'll see. And that's a Thursday. I think that Louisville game might be a
Friday night game.
Friday night game.
Yeah.
So that's fun. But yeah, the schedule is gettable for Clemson. I mean, we just talked about Syracuse probably taking a step back. SMU, a big we'll see, right? We'll find out pretty quickly if SMU is a product of their schedule or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the schedule sets up well for Clemson. I mean, they're bookending. Their real tough games, I think, are bookended. Like, in my opinion, the 2 toughest teams on their schedule are at the front end and the back end. And I think you get your 3rd toughest game, depending on what you think of Louisville. I think the 3rd toughest game is probably Georgia Tech in week 3. So you're going to find out quick how good you're going to be. So I think it sets up well for Louisville to go on a run, or for Clemson, to go on a run in the middle of the schedule before they play Louisville. Yeah. And I think we're going to be set up once again to find out, okay, is Clemson like not only a conference title contender, but are they going to like make a run in the playoff? Are they going to be that good? Or are they just going to be kind of like they were this year, where they're just, get into the dance, get bounced quickly? Is it going to be that kind of iteration of Clemson? So we'll find out pretty quickly there, I think.
Yeah. We'll talk about Clemson in a minute with the coaching changes they made. That's a schedule where Clemson goes 11-1. I don't really care who the one is. They will be like a top 5 team come December. So
yeah, they're in. Yeah.
That'll be a good test. A couple things from the comments. Woke Furby on Syracuse. Syracuse going 4-8. Fan base out of control. The roster stinks. And this is coming from a Syracuse fan. So Woke Furby, here's what we're saying here. I always like the sanity check, Mike. I like the sanity check that I'm not losing my mind.
I do too. Yep.
Alexis Solaris, fall feature request, days counter since the last time Fran Brown took a shower.
Jesus. That's something we can add. That's right up our alley, I think.
Might have to work with producer Scott on cooking something up on that.
Scott was texting me every day. We'll talk about Virginia Tech's defensive coordinator in a second. He was texting me every day that Virginia Tech did not hire one, so that was fun. So he's got that counter down.
That went on for quite a while.
Yeah.
Two other things I want to mention schedule-wise. First, I will mention the Notre Dame games. Has already been mentioned a couple times here, but Notre Dame at Miami on August 31st. They host NC State on October 11th. They are at Boston College November 1st. Part of me feels like there is not a great chance that game is going to actually be played in Chestnut Hill. That might get moved to like Foxborough or something and play it in an NFL stadium. They are at Pitt November 15th. They host Syracuse November 22nd. And they are at Stanford November 29th. So 6 Notre Dame games on the schedule. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I did not call out Georgia Tech's schedule. That for once, it feels like every year these schedule releases come out and we're all like, are you kidding me? How do they get like 5 different ACC teams coming off bye weeks? And how did, you get 3 back-to-back, Thursday night games and just all sorts of just nonsense that seems like completely unnecessary. Mike, this is a very workable schedule in 2025. This is as reasonable and workable of a schedule as I've seen for Georgia Tech in quite a while. And, you pair that with what they've got coming back, it seems like there are some off-season expectations here, which make me as uncomfortable gets.
Man, I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, well, you know how you feel about those, and you love them.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is they open in Boulder against Dion's Colorado. You come home, you play, I think that's Samford, and then you mentioned that you get the Clemson game at home. Mike, if Georgia Tech is 3-0 coming off the Clemson game, the hype train meter is going to be just completely off the rails. It is going unprecedented levels of hype train will be seen, and I'm not banking on it. I as you mentioned, I think Clemson could be really, really good next year. So I'm not banking on it, but stranger things have happened in this league, and we'll just have to see. Also, the Georgia game officially once again on Black Friday, and that game is once again being played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium now, not Bobby Dodd. So
I'm gonna Gardner Webb, not Samford. Thank you, Nick.
Sorry,
there we go.
That was a Bulldog. So, anyways,
we got our bad teams mixed up.
Yeah,
I am going to pick Georgia Tech to cover against Georgia in the season finale. So I'm just going to call that shot now. I've been wrong on that a couple years in a row. So I'm going to go ahead and be wrong on it, picking the Georgia Tech side. And man, Joey, just don't do what Virginia Tech did against Ohio State in 2014 when they won that game and then came home and lost to East Carolina. Don't beat Clemson at home and then lose to Temple, who has a chance to be one of the worst teams in college football next year. Please don't do that.
Temple, who has a chance to leave the FBS sooner than later, like at this point.
Please don't Citadel yourself. Please don't Bowling Green yourself. Please don't Northern Illinois yourself. Please don't. Please avoid that loss.
Yeah, just for context, by the way, at Colorado, Gardner Webb, Clemson, Temple, at Wake Forest, bye week, Virginia Tech, at Duke, Syracuse, at NC State, bye week at Boston College, Pitt, and Georgia. Again, I don't see a whole lot on there that as of today is like really intimidating. And things can change, obviously, and that can kind of go in both directions for any number of teams on there. But, again, I think so much of this is very gettable. You skip Notre Dame. You don't have Louisville. You don't have Florida State if they're resurgent. You don't have SMU on there. And by the way, that's the other little quirk here. We're going to get 2 years into this whole new conference thing, and Georgia Tech has still not played Cal, Stanford, or SMU. So great work by the conference.
I have a big smile on my face, which means, I have a great joke coming. Also, no ideas are bad ideas, but that's that. I almost called him Samford again. That Gardner Webb game, a little bit of a look ahead spot, right? If Georgia Tech, let's drum up some controversy. If Georgia Tech goes 10-2 and they beat a very good Clemson team, right, that might be looking like a college football playoff team, and they upset Georgia at the end of the year, and those would be their two best wins, I guess, in theory. And they beat Colorado, right, to open the year. Maybe Colorado makes a bowl game. I wouldn't bet money on that, but maybe they make a bowl game with Caden Salter. Okay, you go 10-2, but your losses are to Temple and Gardner-Webb, but you also beat Clemson, and you beat Georgia, and you beat Colorado, maybe a few other bowl teams. Is Georgia Tech in the college football playoff? 10-2, non-conference champion Georgia Tech. Are they in the college football playoff?
I mean, that's an arguably better resume than Notre Dame used to get in this year, isn't it?
It would be. It would be. They'd have one worse loss, right?
I guess 2 better wins.
2 better wins, and they'd have a loss in the neighborhood of Northern Illinois, with, depending on what you think of Temple, I guess, really bad.
Yeah.
And
true.
Yes, Nuke Jacket, that would be the most Tech thing ever. You're
really
correct.
Would.
It really would. So there it is.
Yep. Mike, anything else on the schedule?
Nope.
We've got some more things we need to hit on. Before we do that, we'll remind you, all this brought to you by section103.com. Use promo code GOACC. Check out for 10% off your first order. All things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. They've got T-shirts. They've got sweatshirts. They've got hoodies. They've got hats now, just like this one. It is extremely comfortable. It looks fantastic. Highly recommend going to get things from section103.com. They have NIL jerseys. They have an NIL jersey and insurance program, basically, that in the day of the transfer portal, sometimes stuff happens. So, go check them out. Section103.com. They use all the official word marks, the official Tech Gold. I know when the hats originally came out, there was a hat that looked a hell of a lot like one that Brent Key has been wearing up and down the sideline all season. Mm-hmm. And that thing sold out within like an hour.
Oh, yeah.
Mike, they're back in stock. Go check them back out, section103.com. I think in the last week or so, they got everything else back in stock. If there's something they've been missing that you've been looking for, go check it out now. It's all there. Once again, use promo code GOACC at checkout for 10% off your first order. Shout out to Steven and the gang. Appreciate their support of the Basketball Conference podcast. Something for every Georgia Tech fan in your life. Men, women, children, babies, everybody.
Big fans of Steven.
Big fans of Steven.
Big fans.
Mike, we got some coaching news, and I think that's probably what we'll kind of get out of here on. So first of all, when we last recorded, that was like January 12th.
Yep, 3 weeks.
We just got that audio posted like 3 days ago. So first of all, sorry for that. Second of all,
hand up.
Yeah, it happens. On re-listen, I realized that we recorded that episode like hours before it was announced that Clemson was going to be hiring Tom Allen as their defensive coordinator. He most recently defensive coordinator. Most recently defensive coordinator at Penn State. Prior, the head coach at Indiana. There a few years ago when they were 9-win Indiana. Love everyone, all that stuff in the COVID season. Mm-hmm. To your point, Mike. When we talk about like you can do better than Wes Goodwin, this is doing better than Wes Goodwin.
It's the thing I've appreciated about Clemson this offseason is they remembered that like they've won national titles in the last decade, and Dabo is able to get those types of guys on his coaching staff, and when he does, they usually compete for national titles. And then they also realized maybe we should use the transfer portal and like pick and choose our spots and try to bring in impact guys. He came to that realization as well, which I think was extremely important. Tom Allen, upgrade. I mean, he just engineered what was it? Easily a one of the top defenses in the sport at Penn State this year, easily. Defense was not Penn State's problem. Receiver was. Upgrade there. And then Penn State just went out and got Jim Knowles, who, one of the few guys in the sport I would take over Tom Allen, a defensive coordinator. So good for Penn State. They upgraded too. Mm-hmm. Incredible. This is big time for Clemson. I mean, what have we talked about since Brent Venables left? We talked about the downgrade in the coaching staff, right? In terms of defensive coordinator, we had talked briefly about the downgrade, the coaching staff at offensive coordinator. Then they got Garrett Riley in. Then they let Garrett Riley actually run his offense this year, and it looked a lot better. Mm-hmm. And now I think what was abundantly clear when Clemson lost in the college football playoff was that defensively they had some issues stopping the run. And that had been when Clemson had struggled this year. Think the South Carolina game, think the Georgia game in the second half in the opener. Like, they had a lot of trouble plugging up the run consistently, something we've never really had to worry about with Clemson defenses in the past under Brent Venables. You knew they were going to stop the run. You knew they were going to be able to get after the quarterback and produce turnovers. That's something that they really hadn't been doing consistently enough. So you let Goodwin go, and you bring in, for the second time in 3 years, you're replacing a coordinator on your staff. And you bring in Tom Allen, and it is a home run. It's a absolute home run, no-brainer for Clemson to bring in a defensive coordinator as talented as Tom Allen. He's coordinated a great defense everywhere he's ever been. He's at home in South Carolina. His kids live there. He wants to be there. You know, I'm sure he would love to get another crack as a head coach. I'm sure he'd do some things differently, all that stuff. He's still relatively young. He's in his mid-50s, I think. He would love to get another shot as a head coach. Until then, this is a great landing spot. And given what Clemson has on the defensive side of the ball year after year and how they recruit, Allen's going to put together one of the top defenses in the sport at Clemson. I don't know if it'll be next year, but if he's there for the next 3 years, I think you can bank on him having it at worst a top 10 defense in college football. Yeah. And this is an upgrade, but home run for Clemson.
I still have my reservations. I still don't think that he's quite as good as Brent Venables was, but that's probably because Brent Venables is probably the number one defensive coordinator in the sport.
Right.
You know? So it's not really an insult to say that Tom Allen's not as good as Venables is, but I mean, I do think this is a major step up, and I do think that that's something that we probably lost a little bit in the shuffle. Was, I mean, the Venables defenses, like, they were well coached, they were very talented, but I think there were games where it was clear that Venables was kind of coaching circles in terms of play calling, in terms of particular like scheme, game plan stuff. He could coach circles around another team. There were he gave Saban and that Alabama team fits in the national title game that one year. And I mean, they could do some things to confuse opposing offenses. That it's not just that you have really talented players, it's that you're doing some creative and unique things. And I think that's kind of what was being lost with this Wes Goodwin thing, was you just didn't really have any sort of a coaching edge there. It was fine, and that was like a top 30 defense, but it certainly wasn't a top 7 or 8 defense, and there's a big difference there. And so I think that's kind of where you get here. And I would also be, again, I need to mention here that this is probably, from a culture standpoint, fits like a glove. Fitting in with Dabo's culture that he's got there, and you mentioned Tom Allen. He had a really emotional intro press conference with talking about his daughters and
how they wanted him nearby and all that stuff. And I've heard some things about working for James Franklin. I feel like if you work for James Franklin, you probably work for Dabo. Like, I think Dabo's probably a little bit easier to work with.
Yeah. It's well documented that they make a big deal about coaches needing to be able to be there with their families and take time off. And there's a number of those things that they do that, are maybe a little bit unconventional for some of these top end programs in the sport. Definite upgrade here for Clemson.
Let him coordinate. Dabo made this mistake with Garrett Riley. We're mixing Garrett Riley stuff with Clemson stuff. But don't do that with Tom Allen. Please let him coordinate.
Let him cook.
Franklin let him cook, right? And let him cook, and you saw the results. They were a possession away from the national title game. Just let Tom Allen coordinate his defense. Just stay out of the way. Just say, here you go. Here are the keys. I'll stay out of the way.
Yep. And then, as you mentioned, I mean, this is the second coordinator that they've replaced in 3 years, both from outside. He'd also, in that time, I think, has brought in Matt Luke, former Ole Miss head coach, as an offensive line coach. Like,
great offensive line coach.
Just wanted to call out that this is something that we criticized Dabo for a while. Was everybody was promoted from within. There was no new outside ideas, and now there's clearly an effort being made to change that and to right that wrong, I guess, or to kind of patch those holes, whatever it is. for a number of years, I've said I think Clemson is coming back down to earth, and not quite what they were. I'm not so sure if that's the truth anymore, or if that's going to be the case moving forward. It seems like they're fixing the thing I asked them to fix.
We might have found the bottom.
Yeah,
it's like stock, trader, do the whole Danny Cannell cover 3 trader Danny thing. I think we might have found the bottom, right? Might have found the bottom with Clemson. Now you have the best coaching staff you've had since your national title, last national title run, right? You haven't had a staff this good since pre-COVID, right? So this is serious.
Speaking of hype trains, you're a couple of transfers away from the hype train going off the rails here in Clemson. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, they have added some guys that made sense, and Klubnik is coming to his final year of college football, and he's coming off of his best season, and you got some really good, talented young receivers. I mean, how often we talked about, there's been a talent deficiency at receiver since, the national championship teams, and it looks like they've hit on a couple of young freshman receivers that look every bit the part of, some of the really good young freshman receivers we've seen in the past. This might be this is top 6 or 7 Clemson, and depending on how quarterback looks, right, this Klubnik continue to improve, this could be semifinal Clemson potentially. This is serious, guys. We're back to talk about we're doing the whole War Machine Clemson thing when they were beating up on a bunch of bad teams this year. They might be doing that to good teams now.
Good.
So just keep an eye on it.
We'll see how that situation develops.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, also since the last time we recorded, Virginia Tech has officially concluded their search for a new defensive coordinator, hiring a man whose name that I'm confident I will not pronounce right, so I will let you handle this part.
Sam Sefkis.
Sam Sefkis.
Sefkis.
Okay.
Sam Sefkis.
How do we feel about Sam Sefkis, Mike?
It took Virginia Tech about 7 weeks to find a defensive coordinator. They dabbled in I can tell you this as a fact, they dabbled in the Anthony Poindexter market. He ends up getting a huge raise to stay at Penn State. It looked like that he was going to be the heir apparent to Tom Allen, who we just talked about. But then Penn State realized, oh, wait a minute, we have a chance at Jim Knowles. So that changes things. But hey, Anthony Poindexter, we still want you on staff. We'll pay you more than Virginia Tech will pay you. Okay, I'll stick around. I'm a UVA alum anyway. How bad do I want that job? Right? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, he takes a huge raise to stay, and Knowles is older, right? I mean, if Knowles ever stepped away, I think it's Poindexter's job, and you get to learn out under another fantastic defensive coordinator. So great, good for him. Virginia Tech was in the Poindexter market. They were in the Matt Guerrieri market, the safeties coach for Ohio State. Somebody was saying that Virginia Tech called to try to see if Jim Knowles was interested. Let me tell you how that went. Jim Knowles was not interested. Why would he go to Blacksburg? Yeah, you make that call if you're Brent Pry, but there's no way that you're actually going to be able to convert there. So whatever, take a swing.
Yep.
All roads led back to Arizona Cardinals linebacker coach Sam Sefkis, who is our age. And he has coordinated a defense for 2 years in his mid-20s at Wofford, and they were 2 top 20 defenses. They were really, really good. That's his only coordinator experience. Now, the argument is that enough to say justifiably that he's good enough to have and hold a P4 defensive coordinator job? Your mileage may vary on that, but he was good enough to get hired in his mid-20s to NFL assistant coaching jobs, which tells you that at least at the NFL level, they thought pretty highly of this guy. Kevin O'Connell, Mike Zimmer, Jonathan Gannon at Arizona, for the head coach for the Cardinals, they all said really, really good things about him, about his potential as a coordinator. I will say that at the time of hire, Sefkis has more experience than Chris Marv had when Brent Pry hired him. So at least he's got a couple years of play calling experience, and he's coached under some pretty good defensive coordinators in the NFL. So he's gotten some valuable assistant coaching experience there. He's in his early 30s. The hope is that he'll recruit his ass off. We'll see on all of that. the thing I do appreciate for Brent Pry is that he's taking a swing here with a really bright, young up-and-comer from the NFL that's like in his early 30s. If he hits on this, he's a genius. If he misses on it, he's getting fired anyway. By the way, if he just went and hired a retread, because like that was out there too, like the potential, to dabble in like retread defensive coordinators that have been fired all over the place in their career and like have more experience. If that doesn't work, you're also getting fired, Joey.
Yeah.
So like, okay, take a swing. When I originally, the moment the news broke, I was like, I can't believe Pry is this stupid. Then I looked into it a little bit more and I was like, you know what? I like the play calling experience at Wofford. The defenses were very good. I like the fact that he was hired into the NFL at a very young age as an assistant coach in your 20s. That means you're serious. Like they like you. They like you, right?
Yeah.
Some coaching chops. We'll see. We'll see if it translates to the P4 level. I'm okay with it. I'm upset it took this long to figure it out, but they were talking to some guys in the playoff. That's just kind of the way things are when we drag the season out. Fans are really mad. I'm happy they hired this guy over like Matt Guerrieri, who's got no play calling experience at Ohio State, very limited play calling experience at Ohio State. Glad they didn't dabble there. I'm a lot happier with this hire than making that one. I would have preferred maybe Poindexter just because familiarity with Virginia and that sort of thing. But that would have been my pick. That was my pick when Pry first got hired. But I will take it. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see.
We'll see.
I don't know Sam Sefkis from Adam. Like I don't know much about him. Yeah, you're right. I mean, he ran a good defense for Wofford for a couple of years. And to your point, I mean, it doesn't really matter at this point for Brent Pry. Like if you're going to take a swing on a young up and comer, or if you're going to try to get a retread. I do think that our guy Caleb Fields makes a great suggestion here for a retread who could have potentially worked out. One William Jeffrey Collins III, I believe, is now available if anyone wants to hire him.
404.
Yeah, for the culture. My only issue here, Mike, is kind of what you referred to a little bit, which is, and I understand how it happened. Because as you mentioned, I mean, you're talking to Anthony Poindexter with Penn State. You're talking to Matt Guerrieri with Ohio State. These are teams that, once again, we talk about the calendar. These were teams that were deep in the playoff, like midway through January. They were still coaching their teams in this season, and you're not going to you're not really going to disrupt that whole thing to go interview and accept a job elsewhere and like leave your team in the middle of the play. Like it's not going to happen. So on some level, you had to wait until the end of the playoff. But on the other hand, this took 7 weeks to hire a guy who was coaching in the NFL who hadn't been coaching a real game in like 3 weeks. And
you had time to hire him.
So process-wise, it kind of bothers me. And on the other hand, at some point, how much does it matter who Virginia Tech's defensive coordinator is right now?
Yeah, that's a fair argument too. Am I crazy about Virginia Tech bringing in retread Jay Bateman or Jeff Collins or like some names that were thrown out there where I'm like, why do we need that guy? Why don't we just get another? If we're getting another young up and comer that has more play calling experience than the last guy that might have some different ideas, maybe he recruits better or worse, about the same, but maybe he'll take some coaching acumen out of Brent Pry and Bud Foster, who's going to be some sort of advisor to the staff. Like there are some positives by still going back to the well on a young guy. There are still positives by doing that, to your point.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that we're talking about Brent Pry, who when he was hired, it's not like he can't recruit, but he wasn't hired and we're thinking, man, he is going to recruit great there.
Right.
We're thinking, he just ran great defenses for a decade at Penn State. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a great defensive coach. He's got a lot of pedigree in that regard. Like, this is a guy who we're running his defense. And maybe he's not calling plays, but he's probably heavily involved with game plan. And on some level, I guess what I'm getting at is, what does it matter who the defensive coordinator is? It's still Pry's defense. And if
Right.
I would like to think that Pry's fingerprints are all over it. And if the defense isn't good, it's a pretty big black mark on his coaching tenure,
Well,
so I guess
it has been. Yeah, and it has been, to your point.
Yeah.
And it's looked like a Brent Pry defense at times, right? Like, it's looked that way. The problem is it hasn't been consistent. So you got to find a way to play like 2 quarters of Brent Pry Penn State defense and, maybe throw away the 2 quarters of the Temple Owls defense. That's kind of what you got to figure out a way to kind of just look like a top 30 unit defensively, and you're probably going to win 2 or 3 more games a year.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. So we'll see. Again, if we'll see if it makes a difference. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. And, who knows how much of this might get kind of delegated by Pry, and, maybe him being more involved is important. Maybe him being less involved is important. I don't know. We'll have to find out. But Sam Sefkis, the new defensive coordinator in Blacksburg.
You're lying if you said you saw this coming.
Yeah. Yeah. When I saw that tweet come across, my first reaction was, who?
Who? Yeah.
I've never heard that name in my life. But
yeah.
I do think it's important, Mike, that we establish here that being a linebackers coach in the NFL is not as prestigious as being a defensive coordinator in the ACC. Which leads me to my final story of the night. Georgia Tech's defensive coordinator, Tyler Santucci, is leaving to be a linebackers coach in the NFL.
We call that
the Baltimore Ravens.
We call that a transition in this business.
Yeah. Professional. Yeah. This just came out. Well, again, this is Monday night. This came out, I think it was Saturday afternoon, like almost kind of at the tail end of the Georgia Tech Louisville basketball game. Georgia Tech ended up winning that somehow miraculously, but it was kind of out of the blue, and there was some reporting from Kelly Quinlan that Tyler Santucci had some offers and opportunities at other P4 institutions in the last couple months that he has turned down with the intent of staying at Georgia Tech until the NFL offer came around, and lo and behold, it did, and he's gone, and now Georgia Tech is back on the trail looking for a third defensive coordinator in as many years under Brent Key.
Chris Marv's available.
Yep. I'll let him know. I'll call my buddy Brent and let him know that noted successful defensive coordinator Chris Marv is on the market. But
just throwing out some ideas, no bad ideas, like we said earlier.
Once again, I'm a little torn here because if nothing else, with this Brent Key tenure to date, we have seen that I think he's been pretty reliable in hiring new assistants and especially his coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, especially these 2 coordinators were, I think, a little bit obscure where he hired them from, and they have worked full stop and have gotten good results that have been recognized nationally. And I think that's a really good sign. On the other hand, I hate having to go to market and hire a new coordinator in February. And not only just being that the coaching carousel has basically stopped spinning entirely, but also you're weeks away from spring camp starting. And it's just not a great time to be having to go to market and do this kind of thing. And it's not anyone's fault. It just is what it is. But so I'm not as much worried about Brent Key's process. I'm worried about the timing of having to do it now. And I wonder if it might lead towards more of an internal promotion type of hire, just being the timing is what it is.
Or a retread, because I watched this with Virginia Tech when Joe Rudolph left basically right before spring camp started after year 1 under Pry, went to Notre Dame, and then Virginia Tech went the retread route with, a journeyman offensive line coach in Ron Crook, who had been all over the place, group of 5, FCS, FBS, just bouncing around his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see more of these, because of the way the schedules are now. I think that the late January, early February news dump in terms of coaches jumping to the NFL or coaches leaving big jobs, maybe they were in the playoff, maybe they're leaving for bigger jobs. I think some of the stuff in terms of how long it's taking to hire a coach or when these coaching searches are taking place might be more normalized to be this late in the process before spring ball. That's not to say it's going to be any easier, though. Like, we might see it more often, like key coaches leaving. But yeah, I mean, Key's done a nice job with his coordinators. It's tough to find, I think, at least at this stage, because it's so new. It is tough to find, I feel like, an external hire that makes sense, that you feel really, really good about. And there are just not a lot of, you know, to your point, like the carousel kind of stopped. Like there aren't a lot of schools with openings. Like Ohio State's got an offensive coordinator opening. And they got, you know, like, okay, great. Like Notre Dame just hired Chris Ash last week for their defensive coordinator opening because Al Golden went back to the NFL, went back to Cincinnati because his wife and kids are there, and now he's coaching the Bengals, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see more of that, but like it's tough to make a hire this time of year. It could literally be anybody, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, we'll see. And I mean, you can understand how maybe you can entice someone who's currently at a G5 school. You know, you get a defense coordinator from there, kind of make the jump up. It could be someone who's recently out of a job one way or the other, maybe someone in the NFL who, like, the head coach got fired, and just as a result, the defensive coordinator got fired too. Maybe it'll be Robert Saleh. You know, maybe you get a guy like that to come in and be your defensive coordinator. I mean, you never know.
Leave the 49ers. Leave the 49ers defensive coordinator job he just took again. I saw some Ohio State fan say that Ryan Day should call up Mike Vrabel. Yes, the coach of the New England Patriots. I know you saw this tweet, Joey, and you enjoyed it, so thank you.
Yeah.
Saw this tweet about, you know, Ryan Day should reach out to Mike Vrabel, who's got the experience at Ohio State, of course, who's now the head coach of the New England Patriots, to see if he would be interested in coming back to college and become Ohio State's defense coordinator.
You'll never know if you don't ask.
Never know if you don't ask. No bad ideas. It's just like Virginia Tech trying to contact Jim Knowles. You never know if the answer is always no if you don't ask.
We've got unlimited minutes on these cell phones these days, Mike. You can call people and ask them anything. Like it's okay.
One more really, really quick point on this before we wrap up. I think this is our last thing.
Yeah.
This hire, it could be anybody, and I don't know who it's going to be. And it could be internal, could be G5, whatever. It could be retread, could be, I mean, who knows? It's really important that Key gets this right, because with the trajectory of Georgia Tech and the roster it bringing back and how they looked on defense last year under Santucci and the improvement on that side of the ball, it would suck to have to regress. Like this is setting up for Georgia Tech. I mean, we just talked about the schedule a few minutes ago. Brent Key coming off of, you know, how Georgia Tech looked in like a million overtimes against Georgia, and you know, you get Haynes King back to full health, and there's a lot returning, a lot to be excited about if you're a Georgia Tech fan. You don't want to step in it with a coordinator hire. This is a really, really important one. So, I mean, we'll see what that looks like. I think at the very least, you want to try to find, I mean, Santucci is such a good coach, and we talked about everything he did at Duke, and very, very good young coach, but you got to try to find a way to hire a guy that's going to give you at least the same level of production near term, like next year when the roster is this good. And then, you know, maybe if you're in a little bit of a rebuild and, you know, it doesn't work out with the coordinator, okay, maybe you can hire a guy at a more favorable time. You know, the joke was, you know, split zone duo, Stephen Godfrey, the joke was about Brent Key being a bridge coach. Maybe his defensive coordinator is the bridge coach, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're hiring a bridge coach DC, but just try to get a guy who's going to get the most out of the roster next year. And if it works out beyond that, great. And
don't worry about the recruiting ability. Just get somebody who can scheme it up.
Get somebody who can scheme it up. Brian Van Gorder is available. Thank you. Alexis Solaris. He's teaching gym, I think, somewhere.
No bad ideas.
Yep.
Except that one. That was kind of a bad idea.
That was a horrible idea. Please don't do that. Please don't do that.
Anything else, Mike? Yeah,
a clean
to
hour
your
50.
point, yes, I agree. Important. Part of my excitement going into next year was that, hey, we got both the coordinators coming back, we got all this stuff coming back, and to have, you know, some of that kind of taken out from under you. Yeah, doesn't help me feel better about the upcoming fall. I'll say that. So
no, but just get a guy who can coach and get the most out of the roster right now, and then figure the rest out later. Is what I would advise.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, that's all I got. Anything else from you, Mike?
I mean, we just did a 3-week news update in an hour and 15 minutes. That was efficient.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. We had a lot of things to catch up on. I'm sure we missed something. I think Belichick's made a couple hires. He bought some pizzas for fraternities to go to basketball games, I think. A lot of things going on in the ACC.
Belichick's girlfriend is a sweetheart for one of those fraternities, I think. So got that going. She actually delivered the pizzas.
Oh my God. Most ridiculous. Anyways.
What do you think they have in common? I have like one idea, but outside of that, I don't know.
I mean, feels a little bit more like an arrangement to me, but who's counting? It's not, that's their thing, not mine.
That's true. We should do Belichick's 23andMe and see kind of what his heritage is, and see if any of that kind of ties out. We're kind of we're connecting some dots like deep in the family tree in terms of arranged marriages and things of that sort.
Goodness gracious. That's all I got. I don't have anything else on that note.
That one's going to produce some laughs, I think, for people still listening. So that's good.
Yeah. Mike, let's get out of here. As mentioned before, we are actually, we swear this time, for real, no kidding, no cap, on God, whatever the kids say these days. We are doing team recaps. We have 3 of them scheduled for later this week. Already that we have guests lined up for, that they have agreed to come on and do it. So we are booked to do those. Those will be coming your way at some point in the near future. We'll be doing a lot more as well. So if you got questions, things you want us to cover, please send us an email, basketballconferencepodcast@gmail.com.
Nailed it. It's going to be there's going to be some spring practice look ahead stuff because of where we're at with the schedule, because we were delayed a couple weeks, and there's just not really a ton of time right now with the way the college football schedule is between end of year and where we are right this second in the month of February before spring practice. There's going to be some spring practice questions, I'm sure, littered in some of these team discussions. So
state of the program, off-season check-in, something like that.
Yeah, it's going to be across the board. All the teams will be covered. We're already reaching out, like Joey said, 3 are scheduled. We're already reaching out for more in terms of getting them on the docket next week or 2. So we're recording them. They will be in your feeds. Good stuff.
As well as right here, youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. Shout out to the people in the chat that have been here with us tonight. It's been a lot of fun. Good getting back together with the folks. Please hit the subscribe button if you have not already. Hit the bell icon. You'll be notified when we're going to go live next, and can join in on those comments. We'd appreciate the folks and appreciate all the interaction. It makes it more fun for us, and I think for everyone out there. So I appreciate the folks who joined us. Once again, that was youtube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. Mike, go ahead.
I'd like to apologize to Scott because I did not do timestamps.
No.
We're rusty.
Yeah, we'll sort it out. Mike, we're on Twitter @FTRSJoey, @Mike McDaniel SI, together @BC Podcast ACC. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Music, Google Music, Amazon, whatever. All the places you go find your podcast, go find us there. We're also on social medias.
Facebook.com/basketball conference rate review. Find most of our podcasts there.
Please do.
Yeah, I mean, and now you can find most of our podcasts on the audio feeds as well, because we got the audio posted from our last show about 3 days ago. So that's good.
Yeah. Timely is the name of the game of this podcast in particular. Mm-hmm. So please support our sponsors as well. Roback has a lot of good things coming out all the time. I saw a new Mardi Gras shirt today. It's kind of cool. Pretty fun. There's some Valentine's Day shirts on there. I'm sure there's going to be some St. Patrick's Day shirts coming up soon. I'm probably going to cop one of those because I love St. Patrick's Day. Mm-hmm. Home Field Apparel, they've got a link down in the bio or down in the description below. Please use that link. Use the promo codes that are down in the description. Home Field coming out with all sorts of cool, sweet stuff lately too. So go check out our sponsors, as well as obviously section103.com.
You guys are trying to buy us a vacation home with how you've treated us with Home Field. It's been fantastic. So please keep using that link.
Thank you.
it's very, very helpful for the show, and paying for all the soundboard stuff and the StreamYard, and it helps a lot.
Cheap.
It's not cheap. We appreciate it. So
yep.
keep subscribing, keep hitting up our sponsors, please. Very helpful for us.
Appreciate that. Mike, that's all I got. Anything else?
No, we'll be back. We'll be back soon. I don't know if we'll be back live, but we'll be back soon.
Yeah.
There'll be videos on the YouTube and on the audio and wherever you find us.
Yep. Keep tuned here. We will we'll keep you entertained through the off season. We swear, for real.
Yep. Promise.
On God. No cap.
On God. No cap. No
for
cap.
Real, for real.
It'll be a movie. Another one.
Goodness. All right. For that guy, Mr. Mike McDaniel, I'm Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will talk to you again very, very soon. Until next time, go ACC.